Fellas, I made a video not long ago where I basically made the best MMA fighter possible, and this was built off different things like martial arts, attributes, skills, types of attacks, all different types of things to make the best MMA fighter possible. And we're going to be doing the opposite of that in this video. We're going to be creating the worst possible MMA fighter. So we'll take all the terrible attributes or bad habits that fighters have, and we're going to be putting them into one fighter. Please let me know if I missed any type of attributes out, or if there's any fighter out there that is somehow worse than this. And I'm talking about UFC level. Obviously there's going to be fighters that are worse than this. I'm talking like high MMA level. But anyway, we're going to get in there with the first one, which is going to be head movement. And I'm going to go with Shavkat Rakhmonov. Now I'm not going to spend too long on it because listen, there's so many sections we have to get through. But Shavkat Rakhmonov, he's nearly the perfect well-rounded fighter, undefeated. Not one of his fights have gone to a decision, but his head movement is lacking a lot. I've noticed when he fights, he kind of just puts a guard up. He kind of has the Sean Strickland type. I don't know, sometimes I see the Sean Strickland kind of stance, but then he just doesn't move his head. Shavkat, yeah, that's a huge problem that he has where he doesn't move his head. And when he's going up against guys like Wonderboy Thompson, I'm scared that he's going to get caught. Obviously, I'm going to pick Shavkat Rakhmonov to beat Wonderboy, but when I watch Shavkat in his fights, in his previous fights, it kind of worries me, and I think that, listen, this guy, is there any head movement in him? Perfect grappler, amazing striker as well, but head movement is just not there. So if you're a fighter and you've got Shavkat Rakhmonov's head movement, you better hope that you've got a good chin or, you know, really good defense in some other way, because Shavkat Rakhmonov's head movement is poor, right? Shavkat Rakhmonov's head movement is really poor, but either way, the next type of attribute is chin. I'm going with Cody No Love Garbrandt. Yeah, he hasn't had the greatest career in terms of chins. I believe he lost 4 out of his last 7, all by knockout. Obviously, he got KO'd by TJ Dillashaw twice. Made his move to 125 and got slept by Kai Kara France. Yeah, his chin, he's always been dodgy. Some people say that, you know, he gets knocked out in the locker room with a gust of wind. There's a couple people for this list. I guess you could put Luke Rockhold, but at the same time, Luke Rockhold, listen, he didn't have the greatest chin, but he was with some hard hitters. I'm not saying Cody Garbrandt hasn't faced hard hitters, but his chin is definitely dodgy. In fact, I'd argue that if Cody Garbrandt didn't have a bad chin, he'd probably still be a top bantamweight to this day. But he went from being that masterclass he put on Dominic Cruz. That was probably one of the best performances we've ever seen in any UFC fight or MMA fight ever. And then just because of his chin, he'd gone on this massive downfall, and now he's fighting guys who nobody's ever heard of. Maybe he'll be able to make a comeback, but if he continues to fight, I've got no doubt that he's going to get slept again. So Cody Garbrandt for me is a chin that you don't want as an MMA fighter. The next attribute is power. I'm going with Colby Covington. Listen, I know that Colby Covington has more power than the flyweights. I'm talking pound for pound power. It's Colby Covington. First of all, he's not really a striker. He's not the greatest striker either. He's more of a pressure wrestler. Really good at what he does. Really good cardio as well. Really good wrestling. He's actually going to be fighting for the belt at UFC 296. But his power isn't there, man. When he's on the feet, when he's striking on the feet like we saw with Usman, he's more of a volume striker. Because he's got such good cardio, he doesn't put everything he has into every shot, and he's more of a kind of pressure volume striker. He doesn't really have that much power though. You'll never see Colby Covington sleeping anyone. The last time I believe he TKO'd somebody was Tyrone Woodley, and that wasn't due to strikes. I think that was his wrestling. He broke Tyrone Woodley's rib with his wrestling, so it wasn't to do with his strikes. Listen, I'm not saying he just doesn't have that. I'm not saying he doesn't have as much power as the flyweights, but when it comes pound for pound, he probably hits the least. How do I say it? He probably doesn't hit as hard as any of the other top 10 welterweights. Great fighter. Could even beat Leon. I think Leon's going to smoke him, but he has a chance of beating Leon. But when it comes to power, Colby Covington just doesn't have it. So you better pray that you've got cardio like Covington if you want to strike like him, because you're not sleeping anyone. Next up, we have the speed. And for speed, I'm going Rosenstrike. Now, Rosenstrike kind of reminds me of a bad version of Derek Lewis. And Derek Lewis, listen, as much as I like him, as funny as he isn't the perfect MMA fighter. Like, he's got great power. I mean, the knockout that he got on UFC 291, amazing. I think he's just signed an 8-fight deal as well, but he's not in any way, shape or form one of the top level heavyweights. And to be called the bad version of Derek Lewis just says something. Yeah, he's just another short, fat heavyweight. There's a lot of heavyweights that you can use for this. You can say Marcin Tybura, Alexander Romanov. There's a lot of slow, fat heavyweights out there. But for me, Rozenstruik's the one that kind of, I don't know, he just doesn't really have any speed to him. He's kind of he's a bit of a bad fighter, isn't he? I believe he was actually ranked number 2 at heavyweight one time. I actually think he was ranked number 2 at heavyweight one time. I don't know how that happened. But yeah, if he throws a punch, you're seeing that from a mile away. Rozenstruik, he has absolutely zero power on him. So yeah, for power, I'm going Rozenstruik. I'm not power, speed, sorry. He does have power on him. I mean, speed, Rozenstruik. You can see the punch coming from a mile away. He has no speed. Like, imagine him versus Brandon. I actually think on the feet Brandon Moreno would have a chance, just because by the time Brandon Moreno's punches landed, Rozenstruik hasn't even thrown his own yet. So I'm going Rozenstruik for speed. Leg kicks. I'm going Ryan Spann, purely because Ryan Spann just doesn't throw leg kicks. If you've seen Ryan Spann fight, you'll notice that he never, I don't know what it is about him. He just, besides his fight IQ, he just doesn't throw leg kicks. I don't know what it is. Maybe he has a fear of breaking his leg. Maybe he's just not very good at leg kicks. Maybe in every training camp he somehow bruises his leg. But if you watch Ryan Spann, you'll notice that he just refuses to throw leg kicks. Maybe I could have put a fighter that throws leg kicks but just aren't very good at them. But at least that's going to score the points. Ryan Spann, look at his stats of leg kicks. Has he ever thrown more than 10 leg kicks in a single fight in the UFC? I genuinely don't think he's thrown more than 10 leg kicks in a single fight. He didn't use any against Anthony Smith at UFC Singapore, I think it was. Yeah, UFC Singapore. Ryan Spann for leg kicks, yeah, he needs to learn to implement them in his game, because I'm not saying he's an amazing light heavyweight, but he's got a lot of, he could have potential if he actually, first of all, his fight IQ, and second of all, if he knew how to throw a leg kick. So I'm going leg kicks for Ryan Spann. If you have Ryan Spann's leg kicks, they practically don't exist. Then for fight IQ, again, I could have gone Ryan Spann again, but I'm going with Iron Michael Chandler. Yeah, he's been so close to finishing so many of the top lightweights. He nearly finished Oliveira. He then ended up getting finished by him. He nearly finished Poirier, ended up losing to him. He got dropped by Ferguson early. I know he won that fight, but he got dropped by Ferguson early. He had a war with Justin Gaethje that he ended up losing. His only 2 wins in the UFC are Tony Ferguson and Dan Hooker. That's not really impressive if you really deep it. Michael Chandler, he's got all the tools to win. He's got a solid wrestling background. He hits like a truck. He's got genuine talent when it comes to martial arts, but when it comes to fight IQ, it just doesn't exist. I actually believe stylistically Michael Chandler could have been one of the toughest tests for Islam Makhachev, and the only reason that fight hasn't happened yet is because Michael Chandler's fight IQ keeps letting him down. I don't know why. When he rocks a fighter, he goes for a takedown, or I think he's just very hesitant at some points. I actually thought he was going to finish Poirier in that Poirier fight, and then his decisions, I don't understand what goes through his head. I understand that he's trying to entertain the fighters a lot of the time, not the fighters. He's trying to entertain the fans a majority of the time, but sometimes when the only 2 wins you've got in the UFC is Tony Ferguson on a 6-fight losing streak and Dan Hooker, you've got to reevaluate your decisions, and maybe you need to start implementing some solid tactics to winning fights. And he's still not got a fight booked. He's still waiting on the McGregor fight. But Michael Chandler's fight IQ, if you have his IQ, you're probably not even going to make it to the UFC, let's be honest. Then we're going to go for the final kind of attribute, which is knees. And Kamaru Usman, he has terrible knees. Not only is it shown in the octagon that he, when is Usman really throwing kicks, the most action he's doing with his legs is stomping on people's feet. He has terrible knees. Going for leg kicks against Kamaru Usman would be a tactic. And even when he's training, apparently he can't even do running. He can't even run. He just has to rely on swimming for cardio. So not even being able to run because of your knees is bad. In fact, I think he might actually... apparently he's got a fight booked with Bilal Muhammad, which is kind of unfair on Bilal Muhammad. But either way, his knees are terrible. He's close to retirement, not only because of that, but because he just slowed down. But if you've got Kamaru Usman's knees, you probably should take the Ryan Spann tactic and not throw any leg kicks, because... Kamaru Usman, terrible knees, soy knees. If you get a leg kick, a funny leg kick, your leg's probably going to fold. He's just I can't wait until his next fight against Bilal Muhammad, and to see if he actually throws a single leg kick, because I'm genuinely curious who's going to throw a leg kick first. Is it going to be Usman or Ryan Spann? But yeah, his knees are screwed. The next thing we're going to go for is martial arts. So we're going to be taking a look at 3 martial arts: grappling, wrestling, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and striking. And I know that striking's not a martial art, it's a collection of them, and I'm not going through every single striking martial art. So I'm just going to summarize striking with striking. I'm going to be taking a look at the fighters that you probably don't want for these martial arts. And first of all, striking. You don't want Aljamain Sterling for striking. I don't even know if that's how you spell his name. But yeah, Aljamain Sterling striking has lacked. He's a bit of a weird striker. That's the only credit I'll give him. He's a bit unorthodox, a bit of a strange striker. And on top of that, he does have the threat of the takedown. But you look at his striking and it's never really been effective. He didn't manage to do anything significant on the feet against Henry Cejudo. That was 95% grappling. He just got slept by Sean O'Malley, and that wasn't supposed to happen. Peter Yan destroyed him on the feet in both fights, to be honest with you. The best he had to do against Peter Yan was wrestle him. TJ Dillashaw, we didn't get to see any striking because he got injured and he was an instant takedown. He's been slept before. The Sandhagen fight, again, he didn't really get to show striking. So Aljamain Sterling, for me, he just has terrible striking. I could have even put him for power. I was actually contemplating putting him for the power instead of Covington because his power's that bad. But Aljamain Sterling, when it comes to the feet, I don't know why, but he's just terrible. I don't understand how some of these one-dimensional grapplers just don't get good on the feet. Like Ben Askren, he genuinely could have been something special in the UFC if he just spent 10 minutes on learning how to throw a punch. I don't know why they neglect striking so much, because when you run into a striker with good takedown defense, like Sean O'Malley, you're done for, even though he didn't even throw shoot any takedowns in that fight, which was weird. But striking, I'm going Aljamain Sterling. Wrestling, I have done a video on this before, but wrestling, I'm going with Cyril Gane. Like I said, I've done a video on this before. I'm not going to spend too long on it, but Cyril Gane, he's never really had great wrestling. He got out-wrestled by Francis Ngannou. He got ragdolled immediately by John Jones. And I know that John Jones, listen, he's the greatest of all time. There's no shame in that. But at the same time, there is shame in it because of how embarrassing it was. And he just fought Sergey Spivak and beat him pretty comfortably. But first of all, Spivak shot about 2 takedowns. And Spivak I don't know why, he just looked really off in that fight. He looked like he didn't want to fight. Spivak's more of the type of guy to get you in the clinch and then trip you or pull you to the floor and keep you there. Whereas instead, he just started trying to switch up his game plan and go for takedowns. So listen, I'm not trying to discredit Cyril Gane, but he didn't really get the... I don't know, I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but he's not a great wrestler. I could have gone Alex Pereira, but to be fair, Alex Pereira hasn't necessarily lost due to wrestling. He has had times in fights like the Adesanya fight and the Blachowicz fight where he's struggled with grappling, but he hasn't actually lost because of it twice. So for me, Cyril Gane's for wrestling, and he's actually got a decent Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, does Cyril Gane. I think he's got a few submissions on his MMA record as well, but either way, Jiu-Jitsu itself, listen, I know he's been out of the UFC for a while, but I'm going to have to give him an honourable mention. Darren Till, I don't even know what he's going on with his career. He's posting pictures on his Instagram about Misfits boxing him versus Mike Perry. I think he's completely neglected MMA now. I honestly doubt he's ever going to touch the UFC again. Bellator's not even a thing, so maybe he fights in the PFL, but his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is terrible. He got submitted by Dricus du Plessis. He got submitted by Derek Brunson, the biggest gatekeeper of the middleweight division. He got submitted by Tyrone Woodley. His Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is terrible. You could also have gone for wrestling because he can't really defend a takedown to save his life. It really puts into question, what was he actually training with Khamzat Chimaev for that 8 months between the Derek Brunson... No, it was longer than 8 months, I think, between the Derek Brunson fight and the Dricus fight. And don't get me wrong, Dricus is probably going to be champion soon, but still... Darren Till's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is terrible, but for me, if you take every single one of these into account, that creates the worst possible MMA fighter. Please let me know your thoughts on how to create the worst possible MMA fighter, I guess, but yeah, thank you for watching.